Order, please. Before we begin the daily routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel. Therefore, be resolved the government has failed to address the economic and demographic challenges faced by rural Nova Scotia. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the daily routine presenting reading petitions. The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a petition signed by 1,659 fish plant workers in Nova Scotia, stating we, the undersigned, the fish plant workers in Nova Scotia, request Nova Scotia Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries to immediately begin the process of setting up a meeting with the Federal Minister of Fisheries and Ocean Canada to discuss an immediate financial aid package for Nova Scotia fish plant workers that will enable them to maintain their way of life across Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I have affixed my signature to this petition.
Petition is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition that was presented to me, and I've affixed my signature. And it was relating to Family Violence Prevention Week, and it contains the signatures of 4,121 Cape Bretoners that have signed a personal commitment to working towards ending family violence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices a motion. Introduction of bills. Notice the motion. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Eastern Passage Education Centre Phoenix hockey team had another successful season. Whereas the Phoenixes went undefeated for the year, finishing first in their league. And whereas the Phoenixes won the Acrely Zone Championship and finished second in the Capital Region. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulates the Eastern Passage Education Centre Phoenix hockey team, Coach Jean Robert, Assistant Coach Grant Walsh, and all the players and volunteers for a successful season. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers is agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas recent statistics on economic growth clearly demonstrate that Nova Scotia economy has stalled, and whereas instead of dealing with this issue, the government continues to tell Nova Scotians that everything is fine, and whereas the rural economy is suffering from the neglect of this government on issues from agriculture to the offshore. Therefore, be it resolved that the government recognize that the Nova Scotia economy is in desperate need of leadership by this government. Leadership that has been sadly lacking.
Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member Colchester, Muscatawbit Valley.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas firefighters are the lifeblood of rural Nova Scotia communities who are called out at any given time of day or night, and whereas the Hilden Fire Brigade answers a number of local alarms annually while always being ready to assist fellow fire departments with mutual aid assistance. And whereas the Hilden Fire Brigade held their annual awards banquet and ceremony on April 24th, in which they were so kind to invite their local MLA to attend a wonderful evening which included a hot meal. Therefore, be it resolved that all MLAs of this House commend Fire Chief Mike Arsenault, the executive and firefighters from the Hilden Fire Brigade, for their passion and zeal in responding to alarms when required. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas baseball has long been the sport of summer throughout North America, and whereas Baseball Canada will be holding tryouts for the women's national team from May 21st to May 24th, and whereas Nadine Wood of Elmsdale has been one of the only 2 Nova Scotians invited to the tryouts. Therefore, be resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Nadine Wood on her opportunity to try out for the national women's baseball team and wish her good luck in her attempt to make the team. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Clare Acadien Bantam team participated in the SETMA International Minor Hockey Tournament in Dartmouth from April the 8th to April the 11th, 2004. And whereas the team played against Dartmouth in the Odyssey Division final. And whereas the SETMA International Hockey Tournament is one of the largest and most respected multi-level hockey tournament in North America, therefore, it be resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Clare Acadien Bantam team and their coaches for winning the Odyssey Division Final during the 27th Annual SETMA International Minor Hockey Tournament. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Prime Minister Paul Martin is under enormous stress right now as to when to call a federal general election, knowing full well the result will be far from what was forecast last November. And whereas the Canadian Press story reports skittish Liberal MPs are urging the PM to fire some of his people because the B team is in charge and they are wrecking the joint. And whereas one Ontario Liberal MP referred to the PM's current alleged brain thrust as the no-brainer trust, going one step further to call them the Mistake-a-Day Club. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs in this House of Assembly, especially the third-party members, encourage the PM to alleviate his stress level now by calling an election and facing the electorate instead of parading around the country pretending he is actually governing. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
Notice is table. The Honourable Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Knox Amateur Dinner Theatre Players have been entertaining members of Knox United Church and residents of Sackville for many years, and whereas this year's production, Knox Tail Soup, written by Paul Cooper, Malcolm Johnson, and directed by Vanessa Warman, is sure to be a crowd pleaser, and whereas this performance on April 30th and May 1st at Knox United Church in Lower Sackville will continue the tradition of bringing great family entertainment to the community. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature sends best wishes for a successful performance to writers Paul Cooper, Malcolm Johnson, director Vanessa Warman, and all members of the Knox Amateur Dinner Theatre Players for their upcoming performance of Knox Tail Soup. Mr. Speaker, I request passage and waiver without debate.
All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to introduce in the East Gallery 11 students and 2 leaders from Thomas Aquinas Centre. Their leaders are Shelley McNeil and Day John, and I ask the members of the legislature to give them a warm welcome.
Certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the attention of the House to the Speaker's Gallery, where there are 2 visitors from the Clayton Park riding, Halifax Clayton Park. If you'd like to stand, their names are Kathy McLean and Joel Lemoyer, and I'd like us to welcome them to the House, please. Thank you.
Thank you. We welcome our guests to the gallery. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Rubber Association of Canada will sponsor the first ever B-Tire Smart Week from April 25th to May 5th, 2004, and whereas it is a great opportunity to increase the awareness of the importance and benefits of proper tire inflation and maintenance.
Order, please.
And whereas,
order, please. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West has the floor.
and whereas the Mr. Speaker, And whereas by following a few simple steps, I can't do it, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We won't ask the honourable member to repeat that. The honourable member of Kings North.
I hope that doesn't become contagious, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian people are looking for a more responsive Senate, one whose membership is based on elections by the people of the province the individual represents, and whereas reform of the Senate, otherwise known as the Chamber of Second Thought, has been the subject of much debate by all political parties and the Canadian public for decades, and whereas the Prime Minister's Action Plan for Democratic Reform states that democratic institutions must constantly adapt and change in order to ensure the process continues to work the way it was intended. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House urge the Prime Minister to refrain from making any new appointments on Nova Scotia's behalf to the Canadian Senate until that representative is an elected representative. I ask for waiver of notice.
Agreed? Hear a no. Notice is tabled. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
On a point of order.
On a point of order. Order, please. The honourable leader of the official opposition on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, during question period, I tabled a letter to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. It later came to my attention that although the Department of Transportation and Public Works had discussions with this person based on the letter, that the Minister had not, in fact, received the letter. I spoke with him earlier about this. I'd like to withdraw the letter, and I will instead table the correspondence between Transportation and Public Works, and I express my apology to the Minister if that caused him any embarrassment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank the honourable member for that information. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas concerns about the management of Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation have been raised in both the committee and in this House. And whereas neither the chair of the Nova Scotia Liquor Board nor the minister has provided adequate reasons for any of these concerns, and whereas the profitability of the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission has a direct effect on the revenues of the province and will influence the government's so-called balanced budget, therefore be resolved that the minister responsible for the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation provide this House with a complete and detailed account of the management irregularities and the steps being taken to rectify them. And ask for waiver.
Request for waiver. Hear no. Notice is tabled. The honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the municipality of the District of Yarmouth was incorporated in 1879 when provincial legislation brought forth municipal incorporation to all of Nova Scotia, and whereas the municipality of the District of Yarmouth kicked off their 125th anniversary celebration on April 1st with the reception at the Yarmouth County Museum, and whereas a variety of events are scheduled throughout the coming year to celebrate this milestone and to celebrate the people who make Yarmouth such a wonderful place to live. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the 125th anniversary of the municipality of the District of Yarmouth and express their appreciation to all the dedicated men and women who have served the municipality for the past 125 years. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Romano Commission on the Future of Healthcare concluded that public funding, delivery, and administration of medically necessary healthcare was the most efficient approach, as well as the most cost-effective and most in line with Canadian values. And whereas in recent days the federal health minister seemed to open the door to increased private for-profit health care, and whereas in response other provinces and the Prime Minister have reaffirmed the Romano Commission recommendations to renew Medicare, therefore be it resolved that this House reaffirms the Romano Commission recommendation that rather than subsidizing private facilities with public dollars, government should choose to ensure that the public system has sufficient capacity to be universally accessible. And Mr. Speaker, I'd request waiver and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's post-secondary students have student debt loads considerably higher than the national average, And whereas tuition at our universities and NSCC continue to escalate above the national average, and whereas student debt burden is very onerous, and in this guided editorial of the Daily News makes no mention of Nova Scotia statistics, students' line of credit, and other personal arrangements to finish their education. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House commit to the reality of student debt burden in Nova Scotia and a course of action that makes university education and its funding a higher priority. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waivers are agreed. I hear a no. The notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 5 students from Memorial Composite High School in City Mines will compete against students from across the country at the 10th Canadian Skills Competition in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and whereas Kathy Lance, AJ Ford, Stephen Sorey, Brandon Inder, and Norman Samways will travel to the national competition in May, and whereas the students will be accompanied by Memorial High School Vocational Technical Program Coordinator and Team Leader Fred Martel, therefore be it resolved that members of this House join me in congratulating Kathy Lentz, AJ Ford, Stephen Sorey, Brandon Inder, and Norman Samways on being selected to attend the 10th Canadian Skills Competition and wish them much success at this event. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waivers, it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dominion Hawks Community Club was organized in 1989 and received its charter in 1996, and whereas Dominion Community Hawks Club was steadfast in community support for such things as minor baseball, seaside days, and other community-minded projects, and whereas this Saturday, May 1st, the Dominion Community Hawks Club is holding their annual Appreciation Night. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Dominion Hawks Community Club for all its community endeavours and wish them many more years of success in their good work. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers, it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Resource Recovery Fund Board's aim is to promote responsible solid waste management by industry as well as residents through numerous stewardship programs and promotion, and whereas on April the 22nd, 2004, the RRFB handed out their annual Mobius Environment Awards, and whereas the Digby Fire Department's annual auction of Digby received the award for the Volunteer of the Year. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate the Digby Fire Department's annual auction and all recipients of these awards. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Chris Stanley of the Dalhousie University Tigers is the 2003-2004 Canadian Inter-University Sport Men's Hockey Player of the Year. Whereas Chris Stanley has had an extraordinary university career, both athletically and academically, being named to the CIS All-Rookie Team, twice earning All-Canadian honors, 3 times earning academic All-Canadian recognition, and was named the Atlantic University Sports Men's Hockey MVP the last 2 years. Whereas Chris Stanley, because of his leadership both on and off the ice in the 2003-2004 season, was Dalhousie's nominee for the James Beyer Award, was the Atlantic University Sport nominee for the TSN Dr. Randy Gregg Award, won the Dr. Bill Godfrey Award for Best Demonstrating the Spirit of Intercollegiate Hockey, was Dalhousie's Male Athlete of the Year, and President's Award winner. Therefore, be it resolved that all members congratulate Chris Stanley on his individual awards and nominations for his 4-year contribution to the Dalhousie men's hockey program and for demonstrating in great measure the best characteristics of a university athlete. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Captain Jack Arnell, harbour master at Hamilton, Bermuda, knew a good thing when he saw it, and whereas Captain Arnell, like other Bermudians, thought that his family would appreciate the chance to spend the heat of summer in the cooler climate of Nova Scotia, and therefore in 1929 bought land at Purcell's Cove. And whereas the people of Purcell's Cove have for generations enjoyed the Arnell lands, hiking back to Flat Lake, exploring the old quarries, and swimming at Purcell's Pond, Therefore, be it resolved that this House commend the 7 sons of Captain Arnell's daughter Jill for their prescience and generosity in donating this piece of wildland in the city to the Nova Scotia Nature Trust for permanent preservation. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in the early dawn hours of April 29, 1944, 60 years ago today, the HMCS Athabascan was struck by a torpedo and plunged to the depths of the English Channel. And whereas 128 Canadians gave their lives in service to their country that day, including her captain, Lieutenant Commander J.H. Stubbs, and another 38 of the crew were taken as prisoners of war. And whereas we continue to owe those men and their families a great debt of gratitude for the sacrifice they made, therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House recognize the anniversary of this most tragic event and honor the men who served on the HMCS Athabascan. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver.
Mr. Waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers play an essential role in making our communities better places to live, and whereas 93-year-old May Forbes of Bridgewater has volunteered for the South Shore Hospital for 57 years, whereas today Ms. Forbes still works 3 days a week at the Daisy, which sells used clothing to raise money for South Shore Regional Hospital. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the worthwhile efforts of May Forbes and thank her for her many years of service to the South Shore Regional Hospital. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Why, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers give so generously of their energies, skills, and family time and are the unsung heroes and backbones of our community, and whereas April the 18th to the 24th is National Volunteer Week, a week dedicated to honoring many volunteers who are the key of community success, and whereas Doris McCarricher was recognized by the Halifax Regional Municipality for her many efforts in the community, including past president of the ABC Nonprofit Healthcare Association, team leader of the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club's breakfast program, membership coordinator of the Lamont Scottish Clan Society, organizer of the Holy Trinity Clothing Depot, and treasurer of District 9 Citizens Association. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature recognize the important role volunteers play in our lives and pay tribute to Doris McCarricher for her outstanding volunteer service, which has contributed to the well-being of the community of Dartmouth North. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution.
Yes.
Whereas without the valued medical expertise of orthopedic surgeons Dr. Shabra and Dr. Hayder and organizer Diane McKenzie, Pictou County's first hip-hop hooray event would not have been possible this past Sunday. And whereas the hip-hop hooray event is a symbolic walk which raises money for orthopedic joints, education, and equipment. And whereas the Pictou County event saw 93 registered walkers take part, all who have had replacement joints, with another 250 people in attendance to show their support. Therefore, be it resolved that MLAs compliment organizer Diane McKenzie and all participants for their hand in raising more than $20,000 in Pictou County's first hip-hop hooray event, and I ask for waiver.
Request for waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Salt Springs 4-H Club in Pictou County has been active for many years, and whereas over those years many volunteer leaders have contributed to the host of programs that are offered, and whereas the club is sending 2 members to Manitoba on the 4-H Interprovincial Exchange for 10 days this spring, therefore be it resolved that this legislature congratulate Sarah Jean Lees and Mary White for being selected for the 4-H Interprovincial Exchange and wish them and the Salt Springs 4-H Club continued success.
And Mr. Speaker, I want to seek waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Before we go to the honourable member Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cape Breton Screaming Eagles goaltender Martin Oul was selected a first-team All-Star in March of this year, and whereas he was also presented with the Jack Pallant Trophy, awarded to the goaltender with the best individual goals against average, and whereas he finished the regular season play with a record of 34 wins, 15 losses, 1 tie, with the goals against average of 2.32. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate Martin Oul for his noteworthy accomplishments during a very successful season. I seek passage.
Request for waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Saturday, April 3rd, the Bay Road Fire Department, Station 59, held its appreciation banquet, whereas Tim Chisholm was named Firefighter of the Year, Paul York, Top Responder, Andrew Church, Officer of the Year, and Michael Orr, Rookie of the Year. And whereas special recognition went to long-term veterans of the Bay Road Fire Department, Larry Foran, Bim Blackadar, Bill Marr, John Etheridge, John Hubley, Gary Snare, and Clyde Kenny. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate these firefighters on their recent awards and thank them for their contribution to our community. I ask for a waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. If there are no further resolutions, go to the Honourable Government House Leader for order of business.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, with the consent of the House, I'd like to revert to the order of business of presenting reports, regulations, and other papers.
Is it agreed? Table reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, I beg leave to table the report of the Chief Electoral Officer on the recommended changes to the boundary between the electoral districts of Bedford and Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Order is tabled. Orders of the day or question put by members. Question period begin at 12:34 and end at 1:34. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is going to be for the Minister of Health, and I'm just, I see that he's not.
Order, please. Okay. Question period will begin at 12:35.
Sorry.
And end at 1:35. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a substantial public concern about the apparent breakdown in protocols around the safety of surgeries and surgical equipment at the QE2. Surgeries are postponed, surgical instruments were quarantined, and 26 patients were notified that they may have been exposed to potentially contaminated equipment. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that preventative steps should have taken place immediately upon the discovery of a suspicious lab specimen. The hospital CEO has admitted that the system did not work. A breakdown of this nature is naturally very upsetting to the patients involved and also to people's confidence in the protocols that protect patient safety. So my question is, will the Minister tell this House what the investigation is that is currently underway, who is conducting it, and under what authority?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member has brought forward a question which, of course, is very timely and appropriate. I can say that we have been working very closely with Capital Health and Health Canada. The information that became available yesterday afternoon is information that is of concern to all of us. We are satisfied that as information became available, Capital Health reacted appropriately, and we have confidence in that. However, as the honourable member pointed out, the process that was in place with respect to the sharing of information is a situation that deserves a review. And we will be conducting that review. It will be conducted by the Chief Medical Officer of Health in my department, by Capital Health, and by Health Canada. And we want to receive the results of that review in a very timely fashion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think that the Minister of Health actually got to the answer that I was looking for. The province's obligation, of course, is to ensure that hospitals have the human and financial resources necessary to meet the required standards for patient safety, including the safety of equipment. And I don't think the Minister of Health can take a hands-off approach with respect to this. So I'm going to repeat the question, Mr. Speaker. What we want to know is what investigation is underway, who is conducting it, and under what authority.
Good question. Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've indicated the early part of the investigations that were going on were the communications that were taking place between the department, in particular the Chief Medical Officer of Health of the province, and Capital Health. With respect, as information became available relative to the instruments in question, appropriate action was taken. The investigation that will continue, as I have just described it, will be performed under the authorities that I have relative to administration of health for this province, and the report will be made to me, and I will make that report public as soon as I receive it, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is not the first time that surgical instruments and other health equipment have come into question. Recently, surgeries were cancelled at the Colchester Regional Hospital when staff identified a residue on surgical equipment. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians deserve an assurance that the reasons for these breakdowns in hospital protocols will be properly identified and corrected. So my question for the Minister is this: what is the Minister prepared to do to ensure that there is a transparent investigation and that there is regular reporting to the public with respect to this issue?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the situation, as difficult as it is a situation which obviously presents an opportunity to learn from the circumstances that have occurred. And it is our intention to learn as much as we can from this and to share that not just with the health authorities in the province, but with the public. But we also have involved Health Canada to assist us, because indeed there are lessons here that could possibly have nationwide application. So it is our intention to learn as much as we can from this situation, and indeed, the honourable member has made reference to other situations, and we need to ensure that we put in place appropriate protocols throughout our system, and that will be my objective with respect to this investigation. As I said, as unfortunate as the situation is, it is an opportunity for us to put right processes throughout the province, and we're taking that view of it. And as I said, Health Canada, I believe, will provide us with some level of nationwide credibility with respect to this process.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, today we learned that the lines of communication broke down with respect to the probable cause or case of CJD at the QE2. And while the case is still probable, it's absolutely mandatory that the people of Nova Scotia can trust their health care system. Mr. Speaker, it would appear that given media reports today, this trust has been somewhat shaken. According to the Health Act, the Deputy Minister of Health, when he considers it necessary, may visit any part of the province to investigate any matter that he considers relevant to the public health. So my question to the Minister, could the Minister please confirm whether the Deputy Minister of Health exercised this power and visited the QE2 when he first became aware of the situation?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What I can tell the honourable member and the House is that the acting deputy minister, because the deputy is out of the province, the acting deputy minister has been on this situation from the very first. The chief medical officer of health of the province has been involved in the situation from day one. There have been constant communication between the deputy minister's office and Capital Health, as well as the chief medical officer of health and Capital Health with respect to this, and the involvement of Health Canada. Mr. Speaker, I cannot say whether there was an actual physical visit to the facility or not, but I can certainly assure the House and the people of this province that the Deputy Minister has been made this his priority since he first learned of it.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that the minister issued a press release stating that the deputy minister would be remaining on the job until June 1st, then he may not have been present to do his job, as is outlined in the Health Act. Mr. Speaker, there's been a void at the highest level that has resulted in some serious damage when it comes to whether or not people can trust our health care system. So my question to the minister, while this serious situation exists at the QE2, who exactly is steering the ship at the Department of Health?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I'm steering that ship, and I have the able... I have the very able assistance of the Acting Deputy Minister of Health for this province, Dr. Rippey, and the senior staff of the department. And as I indicated, Mr. Speaker, they have been making this their priority since they first learned of it.
Now, member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the fact that the minister boasts about steering that ship leaves something to be desired. That ship may be on the rocks, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm left only to repeat that the trust has been shaken. The trust of the public has been shaken, and this minister has done nothing here today to restore that trust. There are spin doctors and the minister, all that's left holding the credibility of this government together when it comes to the handling of the CJD issue. Lines of communication broke down. The end result is that 26 people are living in fear. That is until the Premier changes the figures again. So, Mr. Speaker, my final question to the Minister, will the Minister immediately instruct the Chief Medical Officer of Health and senior staff in his department to begin a complete investigation of the CJD situation at the QE2?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I won't go there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the House is that I have, in fact, as I indicated in answer to a previous question, put in place an investigative team that is going to review all of the processes that have taken place, and indeed all of the decisions and reactions relative to this particular situation. And as I indicated, that team will involve the Chief Medical Officer of Health for this province. It will involve Health Canada, and it will involve Capital Health. And I indicated, Mr. Speaker, that the object of this is to learn as much as we can to improve and put in place processes that will be fail-safe for the future. That is what we're going to accomplish, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell all of the people of this province that as information became available, appropriate action was taken place. What we need to ensure is that we have a better system of monitoring information and sharing that information. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Yesterday, the takeover by Manulife Financial of Maritime Life was made official, having garnered regulatory approval. While this was going on, Mr. Speaker, no one from this government made any statement or gave any reassurance to the families of those employed by Maritime Life or the many local companies with whom they do business. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the employees were left to wonder and speculate about their future and the cuts they expect in the corporate office and investment and actuarial divisions. The company is one of Halifax's largest employers, so I want to ask the Premier, why is it that this government was silent on what the future holds for these employees and their families?
Good question.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the government has been concerned in a very, very major way ever since we received the news that the headquarters for Maritime Life would no longer be in Nova Scotia. From that early time, the government has worked to investigate, promote, and identify opportunities for all of the employees of Maritime Life to achieve the putbacks that we must now be looking at as we are in the process of losing what was a very important head office in Nova Scotia. So I can assure the member opposite and through him the people of Nova Scotia and in particular the employees that we are doing all of those things that government can do to provide replacement opportunities within that corporate umbrella.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Each and every one of the employees at Maritime Life has helped build our economy, and the government should be working actively to keep these jobs in Nova Scotia. The loss of up to 1,100 jobs in this city and the province would be an economic blow. And once these employees and their families are forced to move elsewhere for work, we'll be hard-pressed, Mr. Speaker, to lure them back. My question for the Premier is that he's known now of this impending merger for nearly 8 months. When does his government expect that the uncertainty about the future of Maritime Life will be resolved?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, and I refer that to the Acting Minister of Economic Development.
The Honourable the Acting Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to reiterate the comments of the Premier on this matter and assure the honourable member and all members of this House that the government has taken this seriously since it became aware to us. As we know, and I think we would agree, all these employees have a sophisticated set of skills and one that the Minister of Economic Development has taken a direct interest in working, and we will continue to do what we're doing, and that's to work on the solid business case that those employees provide for us for new activity here in Halifax.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of this House are well aware that corporate headquarters and the associated jobs are of a particular importance to local economies. This makes the situation with Maritime Life that much more important. So my question is, will the Premier tell this House what personal involvement he has in ensuring Nova Scotia retains as many of these jobs as possible?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, and I welcome that opportunity. First of all, when the information became available to the Premier's office, we immediately started to coordinate an action team to work and provide as much remediation relative to the loss of the headquarters. I personally was involved in some of the meetings and received briefings and had opportunities to discuss this with officials of the soon-to-be company. And so there was very active participation by the Premier's office, by myself, in those two aspects. First of all, direct communication with those involved, and secondly, coordinating a response.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the Premier is rapidly losing the confidence of all Nova Scotians. More importantly, Nova Scotians are learning they can't trust this government. The Premier says he wants minority government to work, but his actions suggest otherwise. When it comes to the federal government, this Premier does not negotiate. Instead, he plays the blame game. Yesterday, the Halifax Regional Municipality issued a press release indicating that the province is not cooperating with the establishment of a capital transportation authority. Another release from HRM indicates the province and the municipality are in dispute over the assessment of the Imperial Oil Refinery in Dartmouth. So my first question to the Premier is, when is the Premier going to step down from his high horse and start building bridges instead of burning them with other levels of government.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the question because the Imperial Oil Refinery is a very important issue. We have seen one refinery leave Nova Scotia, the Ultramar Refinery, which was a very unfortunate day for Nova Scotia. We know we only have 2 refineries supplying the market here. We have the one in New Brunswick and we have Imperial Oil. It is very, very important for those people that work at the Imperial Oil Refinery that we find a way for them to continue with their jobs. But it's also very important that the gas purchasers in Nova Scotia have the advantage of at least 2 suppliers. We will do everything that is humanly possible as a government to make sure that that refinery remains in Nova Scotia.
Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party, the first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'll table those 2 press releases that were issued by HRM yesterday. Mr. Speaker, these press releases indicate that this government is failing to work with municipalities. The Cape Breton Regional Municipality wants to take the province and the Cape Breton Regional Municipality wants to take the province to court, and the mayor believes that their economy is in chaos. The Halifax Regional Municipality believes it is being shortchanged with the establishment of the Capital Transportation Authority and the Imperial Oil Assessment. The town of Canso is being harassed by the Municipal Relations Minister for not completing a study on the town's future. So my next question to the Premier is, could the Premier explain why he has such poor relationships with Nova Scotia municipalities?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we have 55 municipalities in our province, and they do represent a level of government that from time to time finds itself perhaps objecting to some of the initiatives of the provincial government. But by and large, I think we have a good working relationship with municipalities. There will never be a day that the 2 levels of government, particularly when we're dealing with 55 governments, that will always be totally in sync. But what I can say is we have a Minister of Municipal Affairs that is working very hard. He visits and talks with those municipalities. He listens to their concerns, and then he comes back to government and tries to achieve within the total umbrella of government reasonable solutions to their concerns. And we'll continue to use that approach.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the federal government or municipalities, this Premier is doing a terrible job maintaining positive relationships. The Premier has lost his ability to cooperate. So my final question to the Premier is, when does the Premier expect to regain that ability?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If I answer the question, I'm admitting that we have lost the ability. But look, I can assure the member opposite that like all governments, from time to time, there are differences with various municipalities. There are 55 of them. There used to be 65, and I believe at one point 66. But regardless of the numbers, there will always be areas of differences of opinion. But what we have formulated and have committed to is a way in which we can deal with those issues. We have a minister that has shown the energy and the desire to go out and meet with the municipalities. He's done that. He will deal with their issues either collectively when it's appropriate or individually when it's appropriate, and he'll deal with them effectively.
The Honourable Member Full Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the Correctional Services Employment Systems Review was released yesterday, and it presented some disturbing findings. One of the particular findings was that there are systemic barriers to employment equity for all staff within correctional services in the Department of Justice. The report cites in particular a strong gender bias in correctional services. It says that staff make inappropriate comments to females, and some staff are not supportive of females within correctional services, Mr. Speaker. There are many time-sensitive recommendations in this report. Yet the minister says he's going to need 60 days to look at the report, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the minister is, why is his government choosing to stall the implementation of this report instead of acting immediately?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, and the honourable member is absolutely correct. The report does raise very important public policy questions. That's why, frankly, Mr. Speaker, we commissioned the report in the first place. And we commissioned a report because we were concerned about those matters, and we wanted to make an attempt to improve the situation for all our employees and for prospective employees in correction services. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we owe it to them to take the time to make sure our response is correct.
The Honourable Member Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, on your first supplementary.
Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, indeed, this report is dated March 31st of 2004, so it's been in the hands of the minister for a month already, and he says he needs another 60 days. And I would argue that quite frankly, it's a no-brainer. A lot of these recommendations are clear-cut and need to be implemented immediately, and that is what's being said by this report. The report recommends, Mr. Speaker, that the government encourage zero tolerance with regard to discrimination and harassment, and provide training by September of 2004, which is only 4 months from now, or 5 months from now, Mr. Speaker. Given this finding and the evidence of intimidation in the report, will the minister explain to this House why his department preaches zero tolerance with regard to offenders, but refuses to apply the same criteria with regard to staff in correction services?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, the honourable member, for the question. Again, he raises a very important question. That is one of the matters raised in that report, and I can assure you that I take those matters very seriously, as do senior department officials. I can also assure you that one of the matters we have to look at is our collective agreements, because there are issues around collective agreements, as the honourable member would know, and that those issues around collective agreements also need to be looked at in determining how to properly implement the recommendations of the report.
Member Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the report's key recommendations, Mr. Speaker, was that interview panels should include female representatives and representative of designated groups. And there were ongoing competitions within correctional services. We saw them on the website, and the deadline is May 11th for those competitions. So we'll ask the Minister of Justice, will he commit at least to ensuring that the hiring committees for these positions that are currently open will include female representatives and representatives of designated groups?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, and thank the honourable member for the question. It's a reasonable question. I'll take it under advisement and get back to the member.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation and Public Works with regards to the Capital Transportation Authority. The press release that was referred to a little earlier, put out by Mayor Peter Kelly, has a number of significant quotes, and I'd like to put those on the record. One, that naturally, we were shocked this morning to read comments attributed to the Minister of Transportation, Ron Russell, who apparently made it clear to reporters yesterday that HRM will not be in charge of the authority. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, quote, "Until I read the Minister's comments in the newspaper today, the province has never taken issue with our concept of the Transportation Authority." Would the Minister please confirm as to whether there has been a change of heart by the province as to what the composition of the Transportation Authority would be?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
No, Mr. Speaker, absolutely not. Unfortunately, some of the remarks that I made to the media at the press conference yesterday, I won't say were misreported, but were taken perhaps out of context, in that there have been no decisions made as to what the composition of the Transportation Authority will be. There have been no decisions made with regard to how people will be appointed to that authority. In other words, Mr. Speaker, that is just a framework within which the province is quite willing to work, and we understood until yesterday that the province, that the HRM was willing to work as well to form an authority that would represent the best interests of not only HRM but the provincial government as well.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a complete flip-flop by the minister and the government. And I'll quote, Mr. Speaker, comments that were made by a member of the Conservative caucus at the Economic Development Committee meeting on Tuesday, February 10th, 2004, with regards to the composition of the commission. 3 members from HRM, 3 members from the public at large, and 2 members from the general public. And that was the proposal that was brought forth before the committee. And the member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley wanted to know who put this proposal forth, and Mr. McClellan responded, easily, Mr. Chairman, the structure was originally put forth by the provincial side. So my question to the minister is, why have you changed your position?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, we have not changed. I don't know exactly where that composition was conveyed to HRM or by whom, but I do know, Mr. Speaker, that it has always been the opinion of the cabinet and of the department that the composition was something that had to be worked out between the 2 parties. When Mr. McClellan made that statement, it could quite easily have been based on some discussions that he had with staff from either the province as a whole or from the Department of Transportation. I do not know. But, Mr. Speaker, as I say yesterday when I was speaking to the media, I thought I was making my point that this was just a framework and that there were a lot of details to be worked out. The HRM were aware of the bill. They had a copy.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe that Mr. George McClellan has a tremendous amount of credibility in the Halifax Regional Municipality. And I believe the confidence of this process has been shaken by the fact that the minister quite clearly was very confusing in his comments when he had his press release or his press conference, plus coupled with the fact that the mayor's comments were very, very strong and straightforward. So my question to the minister is, will the minister give an undertaking that he will sit down with the municipality and negotiate instead of issuing an etiquette from a higher position without any consultation?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I had a conversation with the mayor a couple of days ago, and as a result of that conversation, I thought that he understood perfectly where the province was coming from with regards to the authority. Mr. Speaker, that authority is very, very important, not only for HRM, but for the province as well. I don't think that the province wants to take over busing in the responsibilities within the city or the ferries, Mr. Speaker. Those are things that remain with the city, but they are part of the authority when it's formed. So, Mr. Speaker, there has to be a lot of discussions. I understand that those discussions will continue, and I hope to have the authority in place by the end of this calendar year.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read from a letter that was emailed to our caucus office from Lee Noose of Florida. Quote, "It is truly a shame what is going on with the drug OxyContin. I live in Palm Coast, Florida, and last year, May 1st, 2003, I lost my 18-year-old son, Randall M. Noose, to an accidental overdose of OxyContin. Last year in Florida alone, we lost 3,200 lives to this prescription drug. Mr. Speaker, all week we've been asking the government to take action to stop the toll that OxyContin is taking on Cape Breton, and all week we've had no real answers. Staff who work in addiction services are concerned about the lack of constituency across the province with respect to services available and the lack of provincial vision. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Health is, given the serious drug problem in Cape Breton and the relative lack of service there, could he tell us what is being done to create an overall provincial vision for addiction services across the province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the honourable member that we are working very closely with the people in that part of the province with respect to this particular problem. We are awaiting recommendations that will come forward from that group, and I can tell the honourable member that the Minister of Justice has indeed made a recommendation or made an offer to the police chief in CBRM and with respect to the enforcement problem, and we'll continue to work in that direction, Mr. Speaker.
Member Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the government has stood by when the 21-day residential program was closed. The government stood by when the straight detox unit closed temporarily for lack of resources. The government is standing by and preferring to point fingers at the Cape Breton police for an OxyContin problem. The people in Cape Breton Island can't afford to wait while the government stands by, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the government commit today to tabling a substantive action plan and resources to deal with the OxyContin plague in Cape Breton?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member makes reference to changes in the delivery of treatment in the Cape Breton area, and I can tell the honourable member that all of the funding that was available for that treatment is still there. It is being used more effectively and efficiently than previously. And that is based on the recommendation of experts in the field of addiction services. There is no blame on the part of this government directed toward the police force of Cape Breton. There is simply an offer on the table with respect to addressing the very serious problem related to this drug, and that is the illegal activity, and that illegal activity must be addressed as part of the overall solution.
Now, member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Premier finally admitted yesterday that OxyContin is a very dangerous drug, despite his earlier statements that it's just good, plain medication. The CMA guidelines for prescribing OxyContin indicate that it should be prescribed for expected moderate pain. But to be fair, they do warn doctors that there is a potential for abuse of this drug. Groups in the United States have been working to have OxyContin reclassified to ensure that it is only prescribed for the most severe pain. My question, Mr. Speaker, through you, to the Premier today. Given the Premier's own realization that this is a dangerous drug, will he work with the doctors and the CMA here to have that reflected in prescription guidelines?
Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much. And the member brings an interesting perspective to the drug, to the attention of the members of the House. And as the member opposite is aware, some of the issues surrounding OxyContin are federal issues that are determined by the provisions under which the drug is approved. But the specific answer, are we prepared to work with municipal and federal authorities to come to a reasonable approach to the use of OxyContin, and in particular with municipal authorities, the abuse of the use of OxyContin? Are we prepared to cooperate and put our shoulder to the wheel? Yes.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. Mr. Speaker, there's a #1 highway in western Nova Scotia that carries traffic off of 2 major ferries. One is an international and the other is a national ferry. And it brings cars and trucks to the western Nova Scotia up to 3 loads per day to travel on this #1 highway. Mr. Speaker, western Nova Scotia has the biggest fishing industry in all of Atlantic provinces. And all these fish are hauled over this highway with #1 in 18-wheelers at 100 kilometers per hour. Mr. Speaker, this highway is between Weymouth and Digby, and it runs through hundreds of homes, schools, and churches as close as 15 feet to the edge of the highway. My question is, where on the priority list is the Weymouth to Digby extension of the 101 controlled access highway?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, it is part of the 101 program to close the gap between Digby and Weymouth, and certainly as federal funding becomes available, it will be completed. But however, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable minister is aware, that present highway is under the national highway system, and therefore the province will not proceed until federal funding is available.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the highway from Bedford to Yarmouth is 300 kilometers long, but from Weymouth to Digby is 26 kilometers long section. In the middle, it has never been touched. Mr. Speaker, I would like to table two drawings that were completed, one in 1992 and one in 1999 by this province. And the other and then there has been nothing followed up to this to give to my constituents a safety constructed controlled access highway from Digby to Weymouth. Mr. Speaker, this very day, over 6,000 cars and trucks, including heavy transports, will use the number 1 highway. My question is to the minister again. Can he give the constituents of Digby some kind of an indication that the 18-wheelers will not be driving 100 kilometers per hour 15 feet from their doorstep much longer?
The honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I can certainly give assurance to the member that we will continue to press the federal government for cost-sharing dollars to complete that section of Highway 101, and I can assure the member that it is high on our priority list of 100 series projects to be completed.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Digby Annapolis just want to know if this will ever get off the drawing board. It's been 15 years, and they would like to see it become a reality. I hear this from them every day. They fear for their children getting off the school buses. They fear for the children playing in their yard. The people live in fear along this highway on their doorsteps. Mr. Speaker, all I'm asking for on behalf of my constituents is a decent 2-lane controlled access highway from Weymouth to Digby. Will the minister responsible help make this happen for the improvement of people's lives in Digby Annapolis and the travelers on this highway number 1?
The honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, I can assure the honourable member that I will do everything possible to secure funding to complete that section. As the honourable member may be aware, we are doing some work on that particular stretch of highway between Digby and Yarmouth, but it's mainly actually construction past Weymouth with overpasses, and I forget the names of all the roads. I know that the Brooklyn Road is one, and I think there are 2 others further down towards Yarmouth. Salmon Road. Thank you.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. The environmental assessment regulations have been set up to protect the health and safety of Nova Scotians, and it is this government's job to make sure the rules are followed. Yet the Environment Minister has said that Nova Scotia Power is going to be able to bypass these rules and install a new generator without having to undergo a Class 2 environmental assessment. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Environment and Labour is, why are you allowing Nova Scotia Power to bypass these rules?
Hear, hear. The honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly will be doing everything we can to make sure that all people who apply for any kind of expansion to their industrial process go through the proper regulations and procedures to ensure that the province is protected.
Member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Tufts Cove plant is within the top 10 polluters of this province. Before we add another generator to that site, we need a thorough assessment. Luckily, the rules demand that such a large generator undergo a Class 2 environmental assessment. But the minister has been trying to argue This new 47 megawatt generator that can power an additional 10,000 households should skip the Class 2 assessment because it is really just an expansion. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, how can you expect anyone to take these rules seriously when your department appears to arbitrarily decide how to use them?
Now, Mr. Environment and Labor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A good point was made that this is an extension of an existing facility where certainly a lot of time and effort has been spent with regards to the environment. A lot of time and effort is still being spent to do everything we can to reduce pollution from that facility along with the owner, and we will do everything that we can in the future to make sure that the province is protected, the environment is protected, and the people are protected.
Now, member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, our Department of Environment and Nova Scotia Power should be working together to figure out how to conserve energy, not create more. Reducing energy use would help us meet our Kyoto targets and reduce our greenhouse gases and improve our air and our health in this province. My question to the minister is, when is your government going to present a serious strategy to increase energy efficiency in Nova Scotia?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's something that we do on an ongoing basis, and we are in consultation with the Department of Energy. We are doing everything we can to look in the long term to reduce energy consumption within the province and ensure that we have a green province for our grandchildren.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2002, the federal and provincial governments signed a $37 million agreement to provide affordable housing for Nova Scotians. As we know, very little of that money has been used. Only 21 new units have been constructed. In my community, the lack of affordable housing is making it increasingly difficult for families to get by. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister responsible for Nova Scotia's affordable housing program is how many more units will the government develop in Nova Scotia during the next year?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, one of my favorite topics because good things are happening in affordable housing. It's great to have the federal government back in partnering with us after they abandoned affordable housing in 1993, and we are working together and we're doing good things in this 50-50 agreement. As the member opposite would know, a request for proposals for 200 new units just went out a couple of months ago, and we look forward to answers to the request for proposals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Halifax Atlantic on your first supplementary. Honourable member Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, in the Greystone area of my community, which is subsidized provincial housing, there is at least one block of affordable housing units which has been boarded up for a long time, far more than a year. I've been told these units are not in use because they're too big. Some are 3 bedrooms, some are 4 bedrooms, and 2 of them have got 5 bedrooms. I've also been told that these units are to be leveled. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister responsible for affordable housing is, why have you not made use of these units? Would it simply be too spacious?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the member opposite, I'm sure where it's from her own constituency, would be aware that it was in fact her own association that wanted to reduce the number of these units. They are not in good condition. There was some negotiations between the Housing Authority and the Community Association, and we came to an agreement that they would only closed down nine of them, as opposed to a larger number, which came forward originally from the association. But since the member is from the area, I'm sure that she'd be aware of this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Halifax Atlantic on your final supplementary.
Ooh. Mr. Speaker, given the affordable housing track record of this government, there's a lot of mistrust amongst the residents, members of that association, about the very future of their homes. Some constituents have been telling me they're afraid the Greystone housing project units may be sold. The property manager has been told that this isn't the case, but I'm unable to receive confirmation from the department. Minister, would you please dispel the fears of these people? Will you commit in this House today that the department has no plans to sell or transfer ownership of the Greystone housing project?
Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'd be pleased to make that that commitment here in the House, and I would encourage the honourable member to speak with the president of the association so that she can be more apprised of what's going on in her own community. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. That's good. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, in responding to my question on user fees on April 20th, the Minister of Finance blustered loudly, and I quote, "What I can tell this House is the government will never follow Ottawa's example," unquote. Apparently that means Nova Scotians cannot expect this government to follow Ottawa's policy of transparency when it comes to user fees. My question to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker, is...
You'll learn something.
Why didn't he just tell... Excuse me.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. All member Clayton. Order, please. Order, please. Y'all member for Halifax Clayton Park has the floor.
Didn't he just tell the Nova Scotians the truth on March 31st and admit he was raising taxes rather than waiting and burying the information in the Financial Measures Act?
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member is, by the wording, is insinuating that the honourable member was not truthful in this House. I ask the honourable member to rephrase the question, please.
Okay. Can we change the word to why was he not straightforward with the taxes? Yeah. Thank you.
No, Mr. Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I guess when the honourable member's question is, why didn't we tell them about the fees? Well, Mr. Speaker, we did. We announced the fees. We put out all the fees. We published them. Mr. Speaker, it was very clear. I didn't send that honourable member a package of them, but if she wishes, I will get one for her.
Honourable member Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, clearly the government has once again been caught with its proverbial pants down. Can I say that? I can say it.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The minister knows that The Minister knows that the Supreme Court of Canada has ruled that fees are only for cost recovery and anything above that is a tax. And what was announced on March 31st were couched as user fees. So my question for the Minister is, will he table the documentation justifying the increases to all of the user fees that are not currently mentioned in the Financial Measures Act?
Hear, hear.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I indicated, the departments look at those different fees and charges, and they look at the areas of what it takes to perform all of those. Mr. Speaker, I indicated the departments review those over to see and ensure that they're working towards cost recoveries, and that's the position we have taken, Mr. Speaker, and that's where we still are.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park and your final supplementary.
Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, are becoming accustomed to this government's lack of openness and transparency. My final question, Mr. Speaker, is again to the Minister of Finance. Will the Minister commit to introducing legislation in this House that achieves the goals of the federal Bill C-212 of openness and accountability in the setting of user fees?
Hear, hear.
Now, Mr. Finance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we have been made aware of that bill that the federal government is putting through, and we'll have a look at it, Mr. Speaker. But as I indicated before, where Ottawa goes is not always where we want to be.
The honourable member Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Yesterday morning, the Blue Nose Preservation Trust Society appeared before public accounts on issue of funding, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps one of the most troubling elements of the agreement between the province and the society is the chronic lack of accountability since its inception. The trust is governed by a Society Act, Mr. Speaker, but unlike most societies, it does not hold public annual meetings, and the membership on the board is limited to an exclusive circle. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister. Why are stricter controls not in place on the Blue Nose 2 Preservation Trust as a society under the Societies Act?
The The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, all societies in Nova Scotia are required to act within the laws of Nova Scotia. In the event that this one is not, we will bring it to the attention of our staff and we will ensure that they do that.
The Honourable Member of Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a power struggle going on in this province, and the province is losing, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Tourism and Culture and Heritage asked for audited financial statements and was ignored. This minister has been turned down repeatedly when requesting the Blue Nose 2 to appear on key events, Mr. Speaker. Letters from the trust either chastise the government for publishing photos of the ship or seek annual funding for the use of these photos. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage, when will he finally ensure that this situation comes to an end?
Now, Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for the question. Indeed, I have written letters in the past, Mr. Speaker, with respect to many issues, including those issues that the member mentioned. And, Mr. Speaker, we have put in a process. We will be, I imagine, within the next week, we will be announcing the transition team so we can move forward on the process we initiated back in December.
Now, Member Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This body is not fully accountable to the government, which owns its sole purpose for being the Blue Nose 2. We have yet to receive any assurances that the new body, which the Senator Moore is helping to create, will be any more accountable to the public than the trust before, Mr. Speaker.
He's a Liberal, right?
So my question to the Minister, what will happen to the significant financial assets of the trust when its agreements lapse?
There you
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and certainly I do agree with the member, Mr. Speaker, and I will point out again the deal signed by the previous Liberal government, the 7-year deal, Mr. Speaker, but Mr. Speaker, I won't go there. What I want to point out and to assure that member and all members that the financial accountabilities and assets which need to be in place for the new entity will be there, Mr. Speaker. It'll be very open, very accountable to this House and to the people of our province.
Now, a member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, the question is for the Minister of Justice. My question is concerning unlimited liability companies registered in Canada. As the Minister knows, unlimited liability companies are popular vehicles for U.S. companies doing business in Canada. When structured properly, they create favorable tax savings for those U.S. corporations. Nova Scotia was for 10 years the only province in Canada that allowed these types of corporations. They generate business for legal and accounting firms, as well as many taxes for our province. Unfortunately, Nova Scotia is no longer going to be the only corporate jurisdiction in Canada to allow this type of company. Alberta recently announced that they too will begin allowing unlimited liability companies. So my question for the Minister is, were you aware of Alberta's intention to begin allowing unlimited liability companies to register there?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yes.
The Honourable Member for Halifax, Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Good.
You do much better that way, Mike.
Yeah. Clearly, this move by Alberta is going to cut into the provincial revenues. But to make it worse, this government has decided to double the fee paid by these offshore companies to register here in Nova Scotia. As of April 1st, 2004, the fee doubled from $2,000 to $4,000 to incorporate and doubled from $1,000 to $2,000 for the annual renewal. My first supplementary to the Minister is, given that you were aware of Alberta's intention to allow unlimited liability companies, why did you decide to double the fees that will impact the revenue of this province?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much for the honourable member's question. Well, I suppose there's two components to the answer. The first is obvious, which is that I can't do anything about what Alberta does with respect to their own company law. I don't control the provinces of Alberta's legislative jurisdiction, and therefore I can't worry about what Alberta's going to do. What I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, is that we believe the fee we are charging is fair and reasonable.
The Member for Halifax, Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I would like to suggest that by doubling the fees at this time, with Alberta entering the market, if you would put it that way, for this kind of business, we will actually be losing a great deal of revenue. So my question is, considering the negative impact this decision will have on the revenue generated by this fee and revenue earned by our local accounting and legal firms, is the minister willing to review this user fee to determine whether or not it was a good idea to double it at this time?
Hear, hear.
Order, please. The question itself is a Financial Measures Act question about a specific part of the Financial Measures Act, so I'll just allow it. Okay. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. At a bill briefing regarding the Capital Transportation Authority, the minister was asked about toll roads. And Mr. Speaker, the majority of Nova Scotians, as you would know, made it very clear that they're not in favour of toll roads. Yet the minister's answer yesterday was unclear. So I would like to give the minister an opportunity to clarify his position. Mr. Speaker, I ask the minister, will this government allow toll roads to be constructed in the province of Nova Scotia, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, for greater clarity, the province has no intention of building any toll roads in Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister stated the other day that if the Capital Transportation Authority proposed toll roads, the province would be willing to consider it. And that's after he stated that he was not in favour of toll roads. So I think that wishy-washy answer, Nova Scotians deserve to know the government's firm stand on toll roads. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, haven't Nova Scotians paid enough with gas taxes and existing highway and bridge tolls?
Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the honourable member has one of these in his desk. I would encourage him to put it on because I said Mr. Speaker, the provincial government has no intention of building toll roads in Nova Scotia.
Member Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Well, like I said, his answer was wishy-washy yesterday Mr. Speaker, we know that members of the Tory caucus, they've actively proposed a toll road between Bedford and Dartmouth. So the future of the Capital Transportation Authority is in question today, but this issue isn't going to go away anytime soon. Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister of Transportation and Public Works again, what assurances can you offer the people of Nova Scotia that there will be no more toll roads in this province under your watch?
Now, Mr. Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, on my watch, we will not be building any toll roads in Nova Scotia.
The honourable member Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the acting minister responsible for the what used to be the Ministry of Economic Development, who's now in office. Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that this government has turned its back on rural Nova Scotia. Our young people are leaving at an alarming rate, Mr. Speaker. Between 1991 and 2001, there was a 9% decrease in young people between the ages of 15 to 24 in rural Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, as of 2001, 707,000 people were living in rural communities. That is 75% of this province. And Mr. Speaker, unemployment rates in rural Nova Scotia are substantially higher than the national average. And that, Mr. Speaker, is a shame.
Order, please. Thank you. Time allotted for question period has expired. Orders of the day. Government business. Honourable Government House Leader.
You want to? Speaker,
You already tabled it.
Didn't you already table it?
No, I didn't. You tabled it. He tabled it? You tabled it.
Oh, I tabled it.
The Honourable Government House Leader on government business for the day.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole House on supply.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this opportunity because my riding of Halifax Atlantic demonstrates many of the issues facing Nova Scotia as a whole today. Like Nova Scotia, Halifax...
Order, please. Order, please. Too much noise in the chamber. Now, member for Halifax Atlantic.
Like Nova Scotia, Halifax Atlantic is an area in transition, on the cusp of great things, or much lesser. The greatest thing I think that we have to face in my riding, and perhaps in the province as a whole, is a failure of stewardship. Stewardship is waste, and waste is inevitably the enemy, whether it is of time, of money, of energy, land, buildings, materials, or people. We are at the moment in the midst of an intricate process of setting the priorities and preparing to put into action the measures which will make concrete the priorities and demonstrate what we value most as a society and as a province. Some of them are unquestionable. There is very little question amongst Nova Scotians at all that the most important thing is health. Without health, human beings are, in fact, wasted. Health, of course, has a couple of components, several components, but we typically divide it into physical and mental health. We're aware of many of the factors which contribute to the wide variety of physical illnesses that beset us today. But one of the most important underlying common threads is, in fact, a threat to the mental health of the populace. And I would say that it is very important that we address this with all the strength that we have and with as much commitment as we do the issues of physical health. We have major problems with addiction in various forms. I find it interesting to note that according to the Psychiatric Annals of July 2003, 44% of the cigarettes smoked in North America are consumed by people who have suffered from a psychiatric problem within the past 30 days. That's 44% of all the cigarettes smoked. It's also interesting to note that the leading causes of death for the chronically mentally ill are in order: heart disease, cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Look at the leading causes of death amongst the chronically mentally ill. Look at the possible causes. Tobacco use, a leading cause of cancer. Tobacco use, a leading cause of heart disease. Tobacco use, the leading cause of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. These are unusual coincidences. When you look at the effects or the relationship between youth and tobacco, you will note that out of those people currently using tobacco who continue into adulthood, half will die prematurely of tobacco-related illness. If current patterns continue, 250 children alive today will die prematurely from tobacco, and that was said in 1996 by the World Health Organization. And perhaps most importantly, cigarette use by adolescents is a powerful determinant of developing profound depressive symptoms. And also, from the American Journal of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, cigarette smoking in adolescence appears to be a very strong marker of future psychopathology. We cannot afford to ignore these coincidences. We cannot afford to indulge this kind of institutionalized addiction. Similar statistics apply, of course, to gambling, which, as we know, is an important part of our provincial economy, and I would argue should not be. A number of these are the direct physical effects. There's also an immeasurable toll taken on human beings daily by living with chronic mental disease. And perhaps this is my opportunity to say that I think that we should, perhaps as a progressive province, as a research-centered province, as a province with enormous resources at our disposal, be looking at some of the effects of the patterns of lifestyle which we are following right now. I worry, I am not joking when I say that I worry about the lack of sleep amongst adolescents. There is huge sleep deprivation, and you'll notice that studies in the United States and a number of institutions in the United States are taking active measures to ensure that sleep as we do nutrition with the breakfast program at school, is supplemented at school when necessary. Duke University has, in fact, enacted such a program, and so have a variety of high schools. Sleep is a tremendous determinant of mental health. Stress is a tremendous result of lack of sleep. And I think that we have a variety of elements, working conditions, which in this province, which are contributing to a global lack of sleep, ridiculous as it may sound. Another basic need for any human being is, of course, for decent nutrition. And once again, the studies have shown over and over again that as much as one may lecture about the virtues of a nutritious diet is not cheap. It's no accident. And it is very important that this government ensure that its help translates into direct food on the table of a respectable nature. Another dreadful form of waste of people can be an inability for people to get the education that they need. I think I referred yesterday to the fact that there are powerful determinants as well between education and health, both mental and physical. It is essential that we as a province ensure that people are able to reach their full potential, that we also look at the stages of life, because there are people who begin their careers in one fashion, perhaps as manual laborers, and are unable to continue. And a number of those people then come to the belief, as they reach an age at which manual labor is no longer possible, that it will not be possible to continue in any way, shape, or form. Unemployment is also powerfully related to depression. No one really wants to see this happen. Nobody wants to see people wasted. So how do we avoid it? We do it by ensuring that people are our first priority, ensuring that needs are met, and that as a society we can in fact tell the difference between need and want. We need air, food, water, and shelter. Tearing down housing, existing housing, leaving housing empty is a waste. Nova Scotia has a long history and the highest rate of home ownership in this country, 70%. And yet Nova Scotia is wasting this gift for short-term questionable profits. The practice of property assessments rising as rapidly as does the value placed on the land is tearing away at the capital of our people and their ability to keep shelter, keep roofs over their heads. The recent crisis over long-term care is only now beginning to end the long-standing practice in this province, once again, of harvesting the accumulated assets of seniors and their families, depriving future generations of the ability to satisfy that basic need, a roof over their heads. Okay. We have a number of other forms of institutionalized waste. One of the most distressing in my riding is that of the commercial buildings and former light industrial sites which have gone unused, in some cases for decades, boarded up, annoying to the people of the constituency, and they're not quite sure why it is so annoying. I would say it's the site of this waste. The National Roundtable on Economy and the Environment, the federal agency, has recommended that there be a brownfield redevelopment strategy. I would argue that the province of Nova Scotia should be leading in this, because the province of Nova Scotia has a long history of industrial use, a long history of now abandoned and light industrial sites. We should in fact be taking advantage of that hand being extended to us by the federal government partnering with them to ensure that these brownfield sites are redeveloped, and taking our own initiative to ensure that as a province we do demand remediation of sites which may be newly contaminated. This is not a deterrent. Nova Scotians seem to be very, shall we say, have low esteem, perhaps, or have a low opinion of the value of this province. And there is a belief that setting standards for the use in this, that setting standards for conducting business in this province will, in fact, make it a completely undesirable place to exist. I would argue that that is not the case. I have been told for years and years that I am so fortunate to live here. And I have friends from all over the world who only wish that they could live here. It is not because we have the best casinos. It is not because we have the newest buildings. It is, it is not because we can find the government. No, we are in an enviable position, and I really hope that as a province we will continue to be proud of that enviable position. The example, perhaps, that I would leave you with is that of my experience near a scrap of land, which I may have told, Dead Man's Island, which was thought to be perhaps of some value, might be of heritage value. It's a little piece of land in the Northwest Arm, and whether or not I've told this story before, there was an anxiety to leave that scrap of land undeveloped. We asked the question, why is it called Dead Man's Island? Did the research. And although the City of Halifax felt that it was not worth the designation of heritage, and the province, by extension, because of somewhat weak municipal heritage laws, although that was not worthy of designation as heritage, at the moment the American Foreign Legion is preparing to erect a monument there. The French government is interested, and the Spanish government are interested as well, because Dead Man's Island is the burial site of some 450, approximately, I won't break it down for you. Yep. Because it is the burial site of people from around the world. Because people from around the world at different times, either as prisoners, as quarantine patients, or as refugees, were brought to Melville Island to be housed by the Royal Navy, either as prisoners or receiving sanctuary. And of those people, a good number died. Those people were buried in unmarked graves on Dead Man's Island, a place not worthy of heritage designation. Luckily, that much at least is now being corrected, but it is as a result of the pressure of governments from outside this province. Others believe in the value of this place, and I do believe that we have no need to sell ourselves short. People know that this is a place in which Nova Scotians can live with a great deal of well, with health and happiness, if we apply ourselves to that, and dignity. It's important as well that we not waste the time or the energy of Nova Scotians. And I would say, perhaps in closing, my father always used to say that he never invested in anything at all that he wouldn't have minded being stuck with. So I don't hope that none of us in Nova Scotia would mind being stuck with what we have here, because what we have is a real natural gift. We must not waste it. And even if no one else wants it, we have it. We must cherish this place. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and speak going into supply today. Today, I want to focus on one line from last Thursday's budget speech that caught my attention. On page 14, I read, and I quote, "And Mr. Speaker, despite the fact that 94% of Nova Scotians have a family doctor." Well, Mr. Speaker, what exactly does that represent? 94% of Nova Scotians have a family doctor. When I look at the pocket budget that was provided to us by the Minister of Finance, we see that the population of Nova Scotia as of July 1st, 2003 was 966,025.
Order, please. Sorry, would the honourable member allow for an introduction? The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the honourable member for allowing me the opportunity to make an introduction. Mr. Speaker, in the West Gallery today, we are joined by a young man who's been in the news lately. His name is Jeremy Hinsman, and he's a young man from South Dakota in the United States who has been refused an opportunity. He's been refused conscientious objector status by the American government. He is here in Canada seeking refugee status. His hearing will be heard shortly in the next few weeks. So I would ask Jeremy to stand and receive the welcome of members in this House. Thank you.
Thank you. We certainly welcome our guest to gallery today. Thank the honourable member for that. The honourable member, leader of the Liberal Party, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, looking at the fact that only 94% of Nova Scotians have family doctors, out of 936,000 Nova Scotians, we recognize that 879,863 people have a family doctor. Mr. Speaker, these Nova Scotians are very fortunate to have a family doctor. Mr. Speaker, sometimes we take things for granted. These individuals don't have to worry, to think about having no family doctors, unlike 6% of Nova Scotians that do. Mr. Speaker, that 6% represents 56,000 Nova Scotians that don't have family doctors. Whoa. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to imagine that 56,000 Nova Scotians don't have a family doctor in this province. Among those 56,000 Nova Scotians, many people are in the western end of the province. And, Mr. Speaker, today I want to focus on the need for more doctors, especially for the people in my riding of Clare. Mr. Speaker, we used to have 5 family doctors in Clare. Now we only have 3 doctors. The people of Clare are very fortunate to have 3 outstanding and dedicated family physicians, Dr. Michel Dow, Dr. Alban Comeau, and my family doctor, Dr. Lionel D'Atremont. A few months ago, we lost one of our family doctors, Dr. Marie-Josée McGraw. She decided to move back home to Moncton. And approximately 4 to 5 years ago, we lost Dr. Leslie Griffin, who decided to continue his studies. So, Mr. Speaker, we're also very fortunate to have 2 other family doctors in the neighboring community of Weymouth, Dr. Barbara O'Neill and Dr. Don Wesby, who have accepted many people from Clare into their medical practices. And we're very grateful for the service that they provide. However, Mr. Speaker, practically every day I hear from someone from Clare that don't have a family doctor. Many have called up the doctor's offices in Clare and in the neighboring community of Weymouth to see if these doctors are willing to take them as patients. But unfortunately, our family doctors have full practices, which doesn't give them the opportunity to accept any new patient. These family doctors have recognized, however, the need of these people who have no family physicians and have set up a daily on-call system for medical urgent needs. An urgent need being a medical urgency that needs to be dealt with within 24 hours. Every day at home, in Clare or in Weymouth, there is one physician on call to deal with these medical urgencies, Mr. Speaker. Being 1 hour away from the Digby General Hospital or from the Yarmouth Regional Hospital, the system gives reassurance and comfort to our residents. Of course, Mr. Speaker, the system is certainly not perfect because non-urgent visits are very high in numbers. This, of course, is happening because of the large number of patients per practice. Even for the patient that have family physicians, making appointments is not easily accessible due to high patient numbers. So usually appointments are delayed anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. So these physicians may see in the range of 50 to 75 patients on any given day on these on-call days. It certainly does not make it an easy day for everyone. Even after the offices close for these doctors, after a full day of work, the doctors remain on call till 8:30 the next morning. So during that time, it is not unusual for these doctors to return to their offices or even to make house calls. A second option for some of our residents that don't have doctors is driving to emerge at the Yarmouth Regional Hospital or to the Digby General Hospital. But that's another problem, Mr. Speaker. There are many people in the Yarmouth area that don't have family doctors as well. We know, looking at the department's webpage, looking for physicians recruitment, we see that there's a need for 3 family doctors in the Yarmouth area. So, Mr. Speaker, there's many people in the Yarmouth area that don't have a family physician, and there's no on-call service available in the Yarmouth area. So the only option available right now is to go at Emerge at the hospital. So you hear stories, Mr. Speaker, from people driving up to the hospital. It's not unusual for people to wait a minimum of 6 hours. You know, I've heard stories waiting 10 hours. So speaking, Mr. Speaker, with the Director of Nursing at the Yarmouth Hospital a few months ago, she indicated that the hospital is looking at other options to address this particular need. Mr. Speaker, I want to share with you a few stories that I've heard from residents from Clare who don't have family doctors. I remember last year getting a call from an elderly man from home. This individual went to the QE2 for an operation, and before he left, he was asked by his doctor in Halifax to whom he should send his reports to. Unfortunately, this elderly man did not have a doctor and told the specialist that he didn't have a family doctor. Of course, the specialist, not knowing our situation at home, wanted to know why this man did not have a family doctor. The old man broke down and started crying. When he called me a few days later, he broke down again. He wanted to know what he should do. And I tried to comfort him and reassure him that he wasn't alone and this problem would be addressed eventually. Again, just last Friday, I was speaking with a mother from Clare. She told me that her son had gone up for an operation in Halifax. Once he returned home, she asked